Title: Don't let the FAA take your license. Watch this first. There's a moment that surprises many pilots. It usually doesn't happen in the air. It doesn't happen during a flight review. And it doesn't happen during a difficult landing. It happens at your desk when you open a letter. The letter comes from the FAA, and suddenly you realize something that thousands of pilots discover every year. Your flying privileges might be at risk. Not because you're a bad pilot, not because you made a dangerous decision in the air, but because of something small, something administrative, something medical, or something you didn't even realize mattered. And that's exactly why this video exists. Because many pilots lose their licenses for reasons that could have been avoided. Today, we're going to talk about the mistakes that lead to that situation, the habits that experienced pilots develop to avoid it, and the steps you can take right now to protect your ability to fly. If you're someone over 50 who is learning to fly, or someone who hopes to fly well into retirement, this conversation might be one of the most valuable things you hear all year. Let me start with a story. A pilot I met a few years ago had spent most of his life around airplanes. His first solo was in a Cessna 150. A simple trainer, but for many pilots, that first solo becomes one of the most unforgettable moments of their lives. Over the years, he upgraded, a Piper PA-28 Cherokee for cross-country trips. Later, a Cessna 182 Skylane for family travel. Eventually, he purchased what many pilots consider one of the most beautiful personal aircraft ever built, a Beechcraft Bonanza G36. If you've ever flown a Bonanza, you know the feeling. Smooth handling, excellent range, enough speed to make long trips practical, but still friendly enough to fly on a quiet Sunday morning. He flew that airplane everywhere. Weekend trips, business travel, mountain airports, thousands of hours logged. Then one year during a routine medical renewal, something unexpected happened. The FAA asked for more documentation. Nothing major at first, just a clarification about a health issue. But the paperwork became more complicated, more tests, more reports, and suddenly his medical certificate was deferred. He couldn't fly, not temporarily, indefinitely. Now here's the important part. The issue that triggered the review wasn't catastrophic, it was something manageable. But because the process wasn't handled correctly, it turned into months of delays. Months turned into a year. And during that time, the Bonanza sat quietly in the hangar. Situations like this are more common than many pilots realize. In fact, the FAA rarely takes someone's license suddenly. Most of the time, the problem builds slowly. A missed detail, an incomplete medical form, a misunderstanding during an examination. And suddenly, you're caught inside a system that moves much slower than aviation itself. Now let's pause here for a moment, because this is where many pilots start asking an interesting question. Is the system too strict, or is it simply doing its job? After all, aviation safety depends on pilots being physically and mentally capable of flying safely. At the same time, many experienced pilots argue that the process can sometimes become overly complicated, especially for pilots who have thousands of safe flight hours. So here's something I'd really like to hear from you. Do you think the FAA medical system is too strict, or exactly right? Should experienced pilots receive more flexibility? Or should the rules stay exactly the same for everyone? Leave your thoughts in the comments. These conversations are incredibly important for the future of general aviation. Now, let's talk about something practical. If you want to protect your flying privileges long-term, there are a few habits experienced pilots follow almost religiously. The first one might surprise you. They choose aircraft that match their lifestyle. That sounds simple, but it matters. Many newer pilots dream about high-performance aircraft right away. Aircraft like the Lancair 4P, the Epic E1000GX, or even high-end turboprops like the Daher TBM 960 or Pilatus PC-12 NGX. Incredible machines, but they also demand higher levels of training, currency, and responsibility. For many pilots, especially those flying recreationally, something simpler can actually extend their flying life. Aircraft like the Cessna 172 Skyhawk, the Cessna 177 Cardinal, or the Piper Comanche. Stable, predictable, enjoyable, perfect for cross-country trips without unnecessary complexity. Another group of pilots moves towards something even more relaxed. They rediscover slow aviation. Aircraft like the Piper Cub J3 or Piper PA-18 Super Cub. flying low along rivers, landing on grass strips, exploring remote areas in aircraft like the Cubcrafter's Aviate Husky or just aircraft Superstall. Flying that focuses on the experience rather than the speed. And interestingly, many pilots say this kind of flying becomes more enjoyable later in life because you're no longer rushing from point A to point B, you're simply enjoying the sky. Of course, some pilots continue flying larger aircraft. Twins like the Beechcraft Baron G58 or Piper Seneca V. Turboprops like the King Air 200-250 or King Air 260. Some even step into very advanced personal aircraft like the Cirrus Vision Jet SF50 or Honda Jet Elite 2. But the common pattern among those pilots is discipline. They stay current, they maintain excellent health, and they treat their relationship with aviation regulators very carefully. One mistake that causes serious trouble for pilots is something surprisingly simple: paperwork. The FAA relies heavily on documentation, medical records, training logs, aircraft certifications. A missing detail can trigger questions, and questions can trigger delays. That's why experienced pilots treat their records almost like a second logbook. Everything organized, everything documented, everything ready. Let's imagine two different pilots. The first pilot flies occasionally. He owns a Grumman AA-1 and takes it out once a month for short flights. Great airplane, fun to fly, but he doesn't pay much attention to medical paperwork or regulatory changes. The second pilot flies a Diamond DA-62 for longer cross-country trips. He stays in regular contact with his aviation medical examiner. He tracks every document carefully. He stays proactive. If a medical issue appears, he addresses it early. Which pilot is more likely to face trouble with the FAA? The answer is obvious. Preparation matters. Another interesting pattern appears among pilots who fly well into their 70s. They gradually adapt their aircraft choices. Some transition into stable touring aircraft like the Socata TB-20 Trinidad or Piper PA-46 Malibu. Others enjoy comfortable cross-country machines like the Mooney M20U Ovation Ultra or Cirrus SR-22. And some take a completely different path: adventure flying, backcountry trips, aircraft like the Quest Kodiak 100, Cessna Turbo 206H Stationaire HD, or even amphibious aircraft like the Icon A5. The sky offers many different ways to enjoy aviation, and the aircraft you choose often reflects the stage of life you're in. But here's something I want you to think about. Imagine it's 10 years from now. You're retired. You have time to fly. The weather is perfect. Your airplane is ready. What kind of aircraft would you want waiting in the hangar? Would it be something fast like the Cessna TTX? Something rugged like the de Havilland Canada DHC-2 Beaver? Or something beautifully balanced like the Diamond DA-40 Star? Tell me in the comments, because the answers to that question often reveal what kind of flying people truly love. The truth is, keeping your license isn't just about passing tests. It's about staying engaged with aviation, staying informed, staying healthy, and staying organized. Pilots who do those things tend to keep flying longer than those who treat the system casually. So if there's one message I hope you take from this video, it's this: the FAA rarely takes someone's license without warning. Most problems appear slowly, and most of them can be prevented. Stay proactive, stay healthy, keep your documentation organized, choose aircraft that match your goals and lifestyle, and most importantly, keep flying. Because whether it's a quiet evening flight in a Cessna 172 Skyhawk, a cross-country adventure in a Cirrus SR-22, or a slow scenic tour in a Piper Cub J3, the sky has a way of reminding us why we fell in love with aviation in the first place. And that's something worth protecting for as long as possible.